at that point, I just remember looking at everyone in the room. I'm like, I'm at least half the age of everyone in this room. Like, why am I here? Like, I remember asking myself that. I'm like, God, how did I get here? And it was one of those things. I just gave 110%. I gave myself to the education that I needed to continue to excel and to do well. And man, it ended up being a really great experience for me.
That little clip came from my interview with Alex Sanfilippo. He's started a couple tech companies. He's done a lot of really good stuff, a man of value, man of passion. He runs the Creating a Brand podcast, and I really love this conversation. Hope that you guys too. A lot of really good stuff about life, business, and productivity. So I hope you guys enjoy, and thanks for listening. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Yield Today with Dallin Candland. I am joined with Alex Sanfilippo, and I'm just really impressed with him. He's done a lot of really good things with his life, just consistently adding value for people, public speaking, blogging, podcasting, the Create a Brand podcast. And I'm really excited to have him here today. Thanks for coming, Alex.
Yeah, Dallin, really appreciate it. And also, you got my name right, so I always appreciate when people can say it properly. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I feel you, because my name sometimes gets mispronounced all the time too. You know, they'll do like Dallin or Dallin or something. So yeah, I listened to your podcast and I was like, all right, I need to get that pronunciation right.
Well, thank you for doing that. You put in the time, man. That goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. So Alex, I was, from what I read from the very beginning, pretty early on in your life, first 10 years, you were already starting businesses. Kind of let us know, like, bring us back to that mindset, I guess, how you were able to connect those dots and go forward with that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'll keep it really brief, but because you mentioned such a young age, whenever people mention like 10 years old and thinking about something business related, people are like, what is this guy talking about? Right? Like, that's always the first thing people think and say. But yeah, for me, when I was a kid, I wasn't great at school and I wasn't really good at sports. I wasn't a great musician. Like, we tried all these things. I wasn't even good at video games. And that's an awkward place to be as a 10-year-old kid, like, it's like, wow, what am I actually good at? Anyway, long story short, I started selling used golf balls in our neighborhood. We had a golf course right across the street. We'd go across the street, we'd get the balls out of the water and we'd sell them to golfers. And a lot of them actually wanted to buy used golf balls at a discount. And I learned really quick after doing that I absolutely loved business and I was actually pretty good at it. It made sense to me. So yeah, here I was, a 10-year-old kid. I think I stopped at the age of 12. Most kids were selling lemonade at that point. They were making $4 and $5 on a weekend. And me and two others, we were making $100 each on a Saturday morning. And,
wow.
Right. So we were doing really well for like little kids. And there comes a point where you're not cute anymore and you can't do it. Like, I think 12 was my cutoff, right? And they're kind of like, all right, you're not such a little kid anymore. You can't really do this and get away with it. But we capitalized on those couple of years. But yeah, long story short, it was really just me selling used golf balls, which kind of propelled me into a mindset of, oh, I like business. I enjoy this. And it wasn't necessarily the act of making or having money. It was the act of making it that I enjoyed. So I didn't necessarily even do anything with the money. I asked my parents at 11 years old, I guess, if I could start a savings account or whatever it was at that point under there. They just opened a separate account because obviously I couldn't have my own. But I wanted to start saving money. And it wasn't because I had any love for money, but I really enjoyed the act of making it because it was like it was my version of creation, right? I believe that each and every one of us, we are created beings made to create. And for each of that looks very different. The creative types, there's all different kinds. My sort of creativity is not making logos, not making video or anything or music or any of those type of things. My form of creativity is bringing in profit. And that's just the way that I'm wired. So yeah, started at a young age, Dallin, but it's been a fun journey for me for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you did a good job of summarizing that. I thought a lot about something I've been thinking about, how we're all created on purpose to create on purpose. I think you summarized that very well. So I think it's really important because there's, this difficult time in our youth when we're trying to figure out like what is our passion and what do we really enjoy doing. You found that you weren't, the best at sports or video games and some of these things. So how did, that initial, I guess you kind of think of it as like a jump start or taking off point at 10 years old. How did that continue on through high school and what kind of things did you get into in high school?
Yeah, it's a really good question. First, I want to mention something from a previous episode of your podcast because I listened to your podcast. It was with Nick Sales, was his name. He talked about how happiness doesn't come from happiness. It comes from purpose when you're actually looking for it. And my story I'm about to share, we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But for anybody listening to that hasn't heard that episode, I think it was number 42, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But if anyone hasn't listened to that one with Nick Sales, I encourage listeners today to go back and hear that one as well because it's a really powerful episode. And anyway, so back on track here. For me, it actually began breeding bad mindsets, which I didn't realize. So seemingly like it was a good thing. Like, wow, this is a young kid who actually thinks about business. Like that's really good. And so at 16, I actually started a tech startup, sold it a couple of years later. It was in the real estate. It was actually making virtual tours of home. So now they're really common. You go into like a picture of a home, you can actually like drag the mouse and look 365 degrees. We helped design that original software, me and a group of people. And so it was really cool. I love that. And then I got into real estate investing and the economy wrecked. But before that, I had already started investing. So I went from very well off to very poor, if you will, or very in debt very quick. So for my age, I had this dream ever since I started making that, the art of making money once again. I didn't necessarily care about the money, but I saw this magazine one time. I don't know what the magazine was, but it was like most successful under 30. And something clicked. I was like, that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. I want to be known as that guy. I don't necessarily care about the money, but I care about that title. I want that to be me. And it breeded a bad mindset. Like I said, I started really getting hungry for more of that power, if you will, and to get that status. So I started investing in real estate. I got a nice sports car, and I was a young kid. I was 18, 19 years old. And I went from being the most wealthy out of anyone my age to, in my area, of course, there's obviously the exceptions all over the place. But so I was doing very well to doing extremely bad when the economy wrecked because I was invested in real estate at that point. And man, it was a tough time for me because I had my first identity crisis. I didn't know my purpose. And I realized all along that I was looking for it in the wrong things, which I hope we can get into today. But that's really, like not to be morbid with my journey, but that's where it went from the next 10 years after that. Like it started off with me selling golf balls and figuring out I'm good at this to ending up in a really serious place of debt and also not knowing who I was anymore.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I think we all kind of go through those different struggles. You brought up something that kind of brought it back to something I was hoping to talk about too, about there's times we kind of drop the ball, so to speak. But I heard this on my 2-year mission trip. One of the church leaders when I was serving for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we dropped the ball, me and my missionary companion one day, and we got to that meeting late. And he told us, I was like, yeah, I'm sorry we dropped the ball. And he's like, you know what? But when you drop the ball, there's a time when it bounces back up. And that's what's important. So how did you, I guess, you kind of dropped the ball, so to speak, kind of focused on some of the wrong things a little bit.
Thanks for being kind there. I definitely did, not kind of did.
Yeah.
I messed up pretty bad. I just didn't see it coming like most people. So it's not like all fault on me. I just wasn't wise enough to see that the economy was going to do what it did. But at the same time, I am and was responsible for my personality and the person that I was becoming that I look back now who wasn't a good person, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So how did you kind of come to that realization and then create from that point on?
Yeah, it started with soul searching, man. Like I had to really sit down. When you're kind of in the thick of something and it's like going really well and you have the momentum built up, it's hard for you to stop and reflect and see where you're at because you just see the momentum. So you just keep on driving forward. But when it all came to a very quick halt and nothing was moving anymore, I had nowhere to go. I didn't have any money to invest. I didn't have anything to do other than do my best to scrape out of debt, right? Like that's kind of where I was really for the next 10 years after that. So it was like first 10 years built to that, next 10 years was getting out of that. But during that time, I really discovered myself because again, I started with this self-reflection. I sat down and really thought about, okay, like who am I? Where am I going? And the first thing I evaluated was who I was surrounding myself with. And I looked at the people that were around me and they were very similar to the way I was, which is just, that's kind of the way it goes, right? You usually surround yourself with who you're going to become and the type of person you want to be. So I was surrounding myself with that, which was more people that weren't going a great direction. Like I wasn't going a great direction. And I'm not saying anything bad about these individuals. They're all great people in their own way. Many of them are different, and even my friends now. But for a season, I realized I had to get out of that. I couldn't stay in that type of realm. I couldn't be around those type of people. And I did so in a very loving way. I wasn't like, forget all you guys, I'm out of here. Like I just slowly backed away. If they were asking me to go out and do different things I just wasn't going to do anymore, I just declined kindly and was able to distance myself a little bit. But it actually created a very lonely season in my life. So not only was I now in extreme debt, I also didn't have a lot of friendships in my life. And it was really tough for me. And one day what really changed is I actually got something in the mail, like physically, not an email. I mean, something showed up in my mail. It's like a one-page flyer. And it was just inviting me to some I think it was called College Life. It was like a church ministry that was right around the corner from me. And I grew up going to church. At this point, I lived in my own home and things like that. But I was like, yeah, maybe I should give this a shot. I haven't really thought about it in a while, but let me go ahead and check this out. So I went to church for the first time in a while. And I remember going there, and for some reason I had this mindset that people were not going to accept me because I had failed in business. I just kind of had that mindset. Like I didn't want people to know who I really was and things like that. And that was all internal. I didn't voice that, but I found really quickly these people loved me for who I was, not for what I had done or what anything outcomes in my life. They just loved me because I was another human being. And because that, I actually found a tribe. I found a community. I found people that really loved me. And that was the start of really good times in my life and really discovering what my purpose was, more so than just pursuing that happiness, or that goal that I had. Instead, I finally really pursued that. But the big change was when I got myself around the right people and got myself in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. It makes me think of the episode you did with Alan Stein, maybe?
Yeah, Alan Stein Jr. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You talked with him about how if you've made some, or maybe it was one with Neri Eyal, but the one like you talked about how if you've made some decisions like, hey, I'm going to be a vegetarian, then it eliminates some of these other potential distractions or other things. So yeah, that's awesome that you're able to make that change, and especially that those people were able to be so welcoming for you.
Yeah, it was fantastic, man. And obviously for me, it just turned into a relationship with God, which is how I've defined myself at this point in my life. Like my identity is in Christ. That's what I believe. And that really changed everything for me. I know we don't necessarily need to get into all that, but like that was the foundation of who I am today. And it all started from just getting around those right people and getting myself again in that right headspace instead of just being stuck in the grind of keep on going. It was stop, think, get around some right people, get right with God. And from there, everything is built up from that point.
Yeah, for me, my relationship with God has defined a lot of the decisions I've made and other things as well. I've tried to, put my efforts kind of in his hands, so to speak. Have you heard the poem, The Touch of the Master's Hand?
I can't recite it if you're about to ask me to, but I have heard this.
I just love that. I just love that a lot. Do you think you can tell it in or a couple, like really
no way.
quickly?
I'm going to butcher it. You go for it, man. That's all.
Okay. Okay. So there's this guy and he shows up there's this violin and he's like, what am I bidding, good folks? I have this violin, and they haven't heard the violin played or anything yet. They haven't heard the violin itself. And so they're all like $1, $2, $3. And it's like going and going. And then this guy from the way back's like, hey, he goes up and he picks it up and he plays this beautiful melody. And I'm sure it stirs the people up a little bit. And then the guy goes and sits down. And then the guy goes back up and he's like, all right, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Right. And everybody's like, well, what changed? What changed? And the guy's like, well, it was the touch of the master's hand. And I think that's something that everybody needs to have in some degree is, some kind of help, some kind of guidance to unleashing their potential. And then potentially they can do that for other people. That's what I've tried to do. But yeah, especially like God knows all of the things about us, all of our quirks, all of the great things about us too. So just wanted to bring that up really fast because I think
I'm glad you did, man. That's good.
Yeah, I think that illustrates it pretty well. Yeah. So, well, let's just go to college. So you've had this awakening, so to speak, and now you're at college and you're going into like some accounting and focusing on business development. How was that for you? And I guess how did everything you felt up to this point kind of translate into your college life?
Yeah, for me, I actually didn't do too much in the schooling side of things. I ended as early as I could because I actually couldn't afford it, believe it or not, which sounds crazy. But I was already in a lot of debt I started real estate before I got into college. And it ended up really, there was no way I could do both. And I was like, all right, I'm going to invest. And then I lost all that money and then I couldn't do both. So I had to just stop. So I did very little bit when it came to that, but I did a lot of furthering my education in the aerospace industry is where I got my focus because I needed a job. If I'm just going to be real, right? Like I needed a job at this point. And aerospace was an industry at that point. I was like, all right, what's invincible? Because I just lost all this money in like the most sure bet ever, which was real estate. and now I don't have any money. So what is something that's not getting affected negatively right now in this recession time? And it was aerospace. Was really a solid industry, still really booming. Maybe not the passenger side of things, but the aerospace industry I got into was manufacturing. It was doing very well. So I got a job there, and I'll tell you what, it was humble beginnings. I started as a part-time receiving clerk, and that's a fancy way of saying that I broke down boxes and took out the trash for people. Like, that's what I was doing at that point. And honestly, I was happy to be doing that. I was honored to be there and being able to do that, because the new mindset I had and just appreciation for where I was in life at that point. And I just knew wherever I'm at, I'm just going to give it 110%. And thankfully, over the next many years, that ended up really paying off for me. And again, I didn't have a lot of schooling, but I did a lot of education in the aerospace industry and in leadership. And years later, fast forward at that job, because there's many years where I was just doing kind of like the same thing, but growing a little bit. But long story short, I ended up being a senior director in what's a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. And senior director, I remember the first time I sat at that table with the other 7, there were 7 of us total that were running the whole organization. And at that point, I just remember looking at everyone in the room. I'm like, I'm at least half the age of everyone in this room. Like, why am I here? Like, I remember asking myself that. I'm like, God, how did I get here? And it was one of those things. I just gave 110%. I gave myself to the education that I needed to continue to excel and to do well. And man, it ended up being a really great experience for me. It gave me kind of like that. I was able to scratch that itch of business that I loved and all elements of it, and really had a lot of fun with that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you were able to kind of go the extra mile from the beginning. Was there any like mentors or other people that were kind of encouraging you along the way of that kind of climbing the ladder?
Yeah, 100%. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because mentorship is just so important for all of us. And for me, it was people within the organization, because I think that's really important to have people that are there, that have been there longer. And the other thing is, in an organization or wherever you're at, always be a sponge is what I say. Never become the master of something. Sure, I remember, like, I was a senior director at this company. I was one of departments under me, I had managers under me, but I always would learn stuff from them as well. And I just kept that mindset of, I'm a student and I'm a sponge. I'm just going to learn and absorb information, ask tons of questions. And I still do that to this day. I don't pretend to know everything. And I hope to never be the person on top of anything that I do, because when you get there, you stop learning. And as soon as you stop learning, you really start going the opposite direction. But so for me, my mentors were everybody around me. And then I did a lot of, like I said, some classes. So I got to work with Dale Carnegie's team, Stephen Covey's team. Like, I got to work with these different people. And I had a lot of virtual mentors as well. So people that I just respected that weren't around me, I had no access to, but I was able to actually use something as simple as Google, find their content and be able to consume that and learn and grow as well. I'm very big on learning. I'm very big on application, making sure that I'm applying whatever I'm learning. I'm not just checking off a box. I'm making sure it's actually bringing change to my life.
Yeah, I think it's easy to learn and not have it really make much of a difference for you. So it's awesome
Right.
you've been able to, learn with this intention of creating and intention on taking action with it too.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, really, I think that's a big point for anybody, because the thing is, with the internet today, you can learn and do anything you want if you can actually just figure out where to find the information, which is getting easier and easier, and then just apply it. People are always like, Alex, how did you start a podcast? I'm like, I went to Google and typed in how to start a podcast, and I worked my way to figuring it out. I just applied what I learned. And anybody can do that with just about anything that you're trying to do. Now, if you're like an engineer or a doctor or something, you should really make sure you get a good degree there and you're careful with that. But anything that doesn't affect somebody's life or anything like that, like, you can learn most of that stuff online these days.
Yeah, I think one amazing thing about that too is like how people will sometimes dissect their mindsets and different things. So you can hear like, hey, this is a mistake you might run into, but I've already gone through that mistake, so you don't have to do that. So
Right.
it's not, I feel like content on the internet has gone way more just, I don't know if long form is the right word, but just, very, very dense. Like, you can get super deep into it. And it's just the matter of kind of choosing something and going for it. What's your advice for the listeners for somebody who might have like, hey, I want to try to get better at, playing guitar and moving forward with that and kind of keeping that long-term perspective to possibly do something with that in the future?
Yeah, the first thing is actually not even online. We're like, I don't know when this is going to go live, but many places are still kind of on lockdown and things like that. Like, COVID's still a thing apparently. But So it's kind of what it is, but getting around people is the best thing you can do. There's a Helen Keller quote that I love: alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And I'm reminded of that all the time with my life. I mean, friendship, the people that you do life with are going to take you further than anything else. So for me, if I'm trying to get better at guitar, it's funny you mentioned I have two guitars on my wall right behind us here, over the side a little bit. But if you're trying to get better at, the best thing to do is surround yourself with other people who play guitar or play other instruments. Get around them, just jam together, hang out, right? And then yes, go online and find, guitar tabs and chords and learn how to read music if that's what you want to do. But go watch some YouTube videos and then just consistently work on that craft. Just keep on going after it. You referenced an episode earlier with Alan Stein Jr., and something he talks about is sticking with the basics. And what that means is never give up the basics. So for me, whenever people look at me pick up a guitar, I haven't picked one up, and I don't play a lot anymore, but if I haven't picked one up in a year and I see someone somewhere, I'll pick it up and I'll play a little bit. And people are like, wow, how do you do those scales so fast? And it's because for 10 years straight, I did those scales 100 times a day, every single day. I stuck to the basics of sticking with the scales. So I think that no matter what it is that you're doing, never underestimate the basics of it. Always remember the fundamentals. Stick with that. Do it. Surround yourself with the community of people that are doing the same thing, and you are going to see results over time.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And one thing that's been amazing to me, kind of revelation I've had in 2020, is how with learning all these different things, it is kind of this pattern. I finished reading Jim Quick's Limitless pretty recently. He just talks about kind of the same thing, having a plan to get something done each day and keeping a long-term perspective. And not only that, but just really reading into what you're doing and active recall and all these different things just to kind of make it a full dive. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think that really, if someone takes something away from this whole conversation so far, it's just to make sure that you're doing those things. You're getting yourselves into the community. You're getting yourselves into the basics, into the fundamentals of what you're doing, and just going after it every single day. And for me, I'm a to-do list guy. I have a checklist every day, but one of the things on there is to make sure that whatever I'm focused on at that time, which right now is growing a software I just started, is to learn something new about how to do that every single day. And some days it's only 10, 20 minutes. That's all I have time for. Other days will be a deeper dive. But at the end of the day, every day I remind myself, just take a few minutes to make sure you continuously are learning something that's helping you develop that craft a little bit further.
Yeah, that's just so powerful to me, is just how if we put our solid focus, 10 minutes of super good focus can be better than an hour of kind of here, kind of there, hey, I'm trying to get this done, but we can talk, and just kind of doing stuff.
Yeah.
So, it kind of made me think about something that Neri all said that I really hope sticks with me is there's the difference between distraction is traction. Mm-hmm. So if you are making some really, if you're making those little steps, that's traction. That is going to get you somewhere.
Yeah, you're 100% right, man. Neri all, his book Indistractable, is literally, I think it's one of the best books I've ever read. But 2020, it's my big theme book, aside from the Bible, of course. That's my number one. This is my number two this year, though. And man, traction, so important. Because so many of us, we say we're going to work on a project, and we're all guilty of this. Whether you're a student, no matter where you're at, even if you're just working on something as simple as homework, right? You've still got your phone. You've got YouTube up, you've got the TV on the background. We are distracted. And here's the thing, if you put all that stuff away, and I learned this actually on an airplane at one point, I'll share that story real quick. But if you put all this stuff away and actually truly focus on the one thing that's in front of you, you'd be shocked at how much faster you can get it done. And many people don't even agree with that because they've never tried it. They're like, no, I can do it with everything around there. But I promise you, if you put everything away and you get only what you need in front of you, you will get more done. Here's an example of that. When I was on a plane, I was going to speak at a conference in California, and I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. So it's a bit of a flight. It was 6-hour flight. And I told myself, all right, I needed to produce 2 blog posts, one on the way there, one on the way back. That's all I had to do. They were supposed to be pretty in-depth blog posts, and I knew what I wanted to write already. So I went there and sat down the plane ready to go. Didn't get the Wi-Fi package, anything like that. I just was, okay, I'm just going to write this. There's going to be no distraction. I'll just get it done real quick. I had my playlist already done because my music was downloaded, so no streaming or anything like that. And on the way there, I wrote 6 blog posts. And on the way back, I wrote 6 more. I actually finished for that website 1 year's worth of content in 12 hours. And I landed, I'm like, how did I do that? I must have just been in the flow of my creativity was sparking. How did I reread them later? These are awesome blog posts. These are so good. And then I really just sat there and did the same thing I did back when I was 20, which is sit down and reflect. And I thought, I'm like, how did I do this? And I happened to pick up a book at that point that someone recommended to me just by chance. Totally random. Was actually one of my mentors. Talked about Deep Work by Cal Newport, which is very similar to Nir Eyal's Indistractable. But the idea is like, if you actually remove the distraction, you can get more done. And I decided to try this at home. I was like, okay, I got my water, so I'm not gonna have to go get water. I went to the bathroom before I started, so I don't have to go to the bathroom. I have my predetermined playlist. My phone is on Do Not Disturb. And all I have in front of me is the computer and the notes that I need, and everything else is gone. The TV's off, everything's done. And I did the same thing again in 1 hour. I knocked out more work that I could usually do in 4. And it's just because I taught myself to get rid of distraction, to actually focus on the traction that I needed to make. So, I just kind of went off on a rant there, Dallin, but this is like a point that I'm really passionate about because I've just seen the impact it's had in my life. And we live in a distracted world, but if you can learn to avoid this distraction, you can do anything much faster than you can imagine.
Yeah, I think it's because like partly is your brain's a little bit more into it and everything. And it makes you think of this crazy thing I heard. I don't remember what book I was listening to. I'll try to make this real fast. But basically this guy paid like, $1,000, $3,000 to fly all the way to Japan, so he could finish writing this book.
Oh yeah. What is that from?
Like that was the only reason. But he was able to get it done. He was so focused, and it was worth it. It was so worth that investment of paying like $2,000-$3,000 just so he could get that environment. So that's something I'm trying to get better at too. I use the Forest app. So like if I'm working on my podcast, if I'm working on writing, I have different tags, and then I just at the end of the month I can see like how much average I spent on each thing. So what system and different tools do you use to kind of help you keep on track, stay motivated with these things?
Yeah, so the first thing I use for music now, because I'm a bit of a music junkie. I mean, I love music. So the biggest thing that distracts me isn't necessarily a notification that came up. It's more so, what song do I need right now to get this done? And then you can spend 20 minutes looking for a song without realizing, be like, oh, wow, they let out a new album? Oh, I kind of want to hear that. Like look at my phone while I'm doing this. I'm like, wow, really? No way. And next thing you know, you're like, what was I doing here again? Like, why am I even here? So what I did is actually my friend recently, he was a guest on my podcast last year. He's one of these big name Amazon sellers, Max Abreu. And he told me about this app called Brain.fm. And it is just music that has been actually proven. They did all this polling and like scientifically figure out how it messes with the mind and things like that to actually keep you focused on what you're doing. So it's music that's not going to overly engage you, but also keep you engaged enough that it actually keeps a rhythm of focus going. Really fascinating stuff. And there's science behind it and all. And it's helped me a lot. So I just put that on. It's not the music I necessarily want to listen to, but it's what I need to hear at that point. Another thing is just keeping everything off. So like something as simple as your smartphone. Turn it on Do Not Disturb or not on vibrate, and don't leave it face up where you can see the screen when it lights up. I flip it upside down and I'll leave it that way for the hour that I'm going to focus. And the thing is, I think many of us, at least me, I'm a bit of an overachiever, Dallin, if I'm being honest with you. So for me, like when I first did this, I'm like, I'm going to focus for 8 hours straight and nothing's going to distract me. It's just not realistic. You're better off doing a sprint when it comes to actually staying focused. So for me, it's a time block. I rarely do anything for longer than an hour, but I will set a 1 hour block in my calendar where I know that 1 hour I'm only doing this. I'm not going to open my email. I'm going to go to the bathroom beforehand. I'm going to get my water beforehand. If I need a snack, I'm going to get it now. And that 1 hour is going to be focused. And then at the end of that hour, I'll pick up my phone. I'll take a look at it. I'll check my email real quick. I'll go to the bathroom. I'll go get something to eat. Like all those different things will happen. But in that 1 hour, make sure that I'm really focused. So for me, it comes down to really self-discipline, which isn't a tool that's super tangible, but it's something that we all need to we really need to learn, and we have to be getting better at. And you do that by flexing that muscle every single day. There's a quote that I don't know. I think I made it up. Let's just say that, but you're only as disciplined as the temptation you overcome. So for you, whatever that temptation is, you're only really as disciplined as that temptation, whatever that might be for you. Some of us are addicted to inbox zero. We want no emails in our inbox ever. So we're checking every 5 minutes to see if there's something else to knock out. You're only as disciplined as your ability to put that away and be okay with your emails building up for a little bit, or your text message, or your notifications on social media. That's a discipline we all have to have. So for me, I don't have a lot of tangible tools other than my calendar, my checklist, and then just my internal drive, knowing that this has to get done for me to continue to drive forward where I want to go. But it's all things that aren't necessarily super tangible. It's mindsets and things that we have to do internally.
Yeah, that's awesome. You kind of made me think of a quote I was thinking about couple of nights ago, probably when I went to go to sleep, it was, you know, only those who are able to conquer temptation know how strong it actually is. Because I feel like sometimes it's easy to get into this autopilot thing. You don't really have a long-term vision. And so it's easy to just check Instagram or check all these different things. So that's really amazing that you've been able to kind of subdue all of that and just kind of get into your own chamber, I guess, of isolation in a way, you know, to get all
Yeah.
of this work done. That's amazing, because I feel like there's the, you know, the squirrel syndrome or whatever you want to call it, of like
Right.
shiny object.
Yeah.
There's always sales, there's always deals, there's always one-time offers, all these things. And so it's super important to stay focused on that thing you want to get done.
Yeah, I've found that to be equally as true. Like, really have. And I'm not, by any means, I want everyone to know this, I'm not claiming to be someone who's arrived and is perfect at this. I still struggle with the stuff I'm talking about now. There are days when for some reason I just can't get focused. I'm addicted to achievement. So for me, a checklist is amazing. And I want to get that done as soon as possible because it's a great feeling for me personally. And that's just the way that I'm wired. And I have to fight that temptation. Like, that's what I fight. Some people are just fighting, like, I just want to go off the couch today. I'm like, I need to slow down and not just do 100 things today. I just need to do the one thing that matters instead. So for me, I'm not claiming that I've arrived. We all have our own very unique set of temptation. It's going to look very different for each and every one of us. But what's important is that you identify it. And you do this by sitting back. Once again, this is a trend I have here today, and reflecting, thinking about what are the things that keep me distracted from what I know needs to get done. And so for me, this is actually something I do every single day. I have a journal and I write in it every single day. I mean, I haven't missed it. I don't even know how long it's been. I have a number written down. I'm not going to turn around and look at it, but basically for at least, I know I haven't missed one day this month. I write every single day, and I'll write a little bit about yesterday. What distracted me? What kept me from getting things done? What was the temptation I needed to overcome? What needs to happen today? And by doing this, you create clarity within yourself. And someone I respect a lot is Brendan Bouchard. And he says, those that reflect the most win the most because they're the most clear about where they're going. So for all of us, we have to sit back and think about what are those things that keep me away from what needs to happen. At the end of the day, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all these things, they're always going to be there. And I don't believe that that is your purpose, your mission. It's great to have the time of relaxation, but you have to know when that is taking priority over what you know deep down inside you need to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial, because it's easy to kind of, you know, I really like this quote that I heard when I was the basketball manager back in high school. You know, is that there will come a time when winter will ask what you were doing all summer. And the same thing goes with like all these other things. There will come a time when this will ask what you were doing during this and whatever. You know, it's important to, you know, squeeze in that time. Well, tell us about some of the projects you've done and some of the things you've been able to accomplish with those, on just kind of on the side.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I'm doing these things and becoming more disciplined, side hustling became part of my life. I mean, it just really did, like having something on the side of what I'm doing. Again, for me to flex that creative element that I have, which for me, once again, is building something that creates some form of profit or it drives some sort of traffic. It's something I love doing. So it was actually on July 2nd, 2019, I launched the Creating a Brand podcast.
Wow.
And since then, it's done really well. Like I'm humbled to be able to say that we have a great audience and the guests have been phenomenal. I've had a really good time with it, learned a ton along the way. But that's one of those things I knew I wanted to do. And so when I did that, I started off by looking at how much time it was going to take. Because I mean, listen, anyone who's listening today, Dallin is doing a great favor for you, because podcasting is a labor of love. A lot of times it is a ton of work. This isn't just like press a button, hit play, and then hit publish. It doesn't really work like that. There's a lot that goes into it. And it's why most people, this is an interesting stat, there's 1.4 million podcasts, and probably 1.5 by the time this goes live. And out of all of those, only 40% of them have more than 10 episodes. And,
Oh, wow.
And out of those, I believe only 30% of them are still active. So if you really look at podcasting, there's not that many people involved. People are like, oh, wow, it's really blowing up. Everyone has a podcast. Everyone has a podcast episode, but most of them only do one. Something like 26% of people only do one episode. And these stats are not from me. These are actually from a website that does a really good job with podcasting stats. You can just Google podcast stats and you'll find it pretty easily. But more or less, like there's a lot that goes into it. So for me, when I launched the Creating a Brand podcast, I knew that I was biting off quite a bit. And I had to sit down and evaluate my time once again, take inventory of what I was doing. Was there anything I could push out that wasn't what I wanted to do or what I knew that I should be doing deep down inside. Because for me, even this podcast that I do, creating a brand is a calling. And I knew it was something I needed to do. And there's a quote that I absolutely love. Sometimes you have to say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. And for me, I knew that that's what I had to do. There was things in my life that were good, but I had to challenge those things and say, you know what, I have to get rid of these good things because potentially this could be great instead. That's a little bit of a risk. It's not comfortable. It's a challenge internally, but it's one of those things I had to do. So that's one of my big projects that I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about. Put a lot of time and energy into that one for sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate the thought about how podcasting's a labor of love. It definitely is.
Yep.
Yeah. It's once this goes live, it'll be September. So we'll have been doing podcasting for over a year at this point, because I started in August 2019. So yeah.
Congratulations. Good for you, man.
Thank you. Yeah. It's just really important that I think you have that long-term perspective in mind. I started a YouTube channel with my friends back when I was like 15, 16. We learned, we made like 100 videos our first year, just video games and stuff and talking. And then it's kind of added up. Now there's over 500 on there. And so I had this perspective, like, where do I want this to be in a year? Where do I want this to be in 2 years? And the thing about podcasting too, is there's a little bit more investment, because you're usually paying every month or something along those lines. But I think it's super valuable just taking putting that investment in yourself, going after it, and something that helps me is like, do I want this to be a thing? Do I want it to be a thing in a year? Or do I want to still be thinking about it?
Right. Yeah. There's a quote. I know I mentioned a lot of quotes, but if you're somebody that's thinking about something and you're just not sure if you want to do it, eventually I believe that you will. First off, just take the risk and do it. But there's a quote that says the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago. The second best time is today. And when I look at my life and knowing that I was supposed to get into podcasting, if I would have waited 5 more years, then it would be a totally different ballgame. We're still pretty early in the podcasting game, but it's funny. I had this same conversation with John Lee Dumas, who has Entrepreneurs on Fire. And he's one of the biggest podcasters. And when I was talking to him, we were just having a conversation. He goes, "You have a really good podcast, Alex." He goes, "Actually, you don't even do anything different than I do." He goes, "If you would have started the same day I would, you would have been just as successful as I am." He goes, "The only thing I have on you is time." And he's absolutely, he's right. It's just the time that he's been doing it. So for all of us, whatever we're thinking about doing, start today. Don't wait another few years. Start today and just make sure you do it consistently. Because at the end of the day, the people that are winning in the world today are the ones that can stay consistent with what they're doing. So even when it comes to having a day of self-discipline where you're really focused on a project, if you just do it one day, great. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. But if you can do that every single day or every single week or a few times a week, consistently showing up and bringing your A game, that's going to make a difference in the long run. And I think to the old tale, what is it? The tortoise and the hare, I think is what it was called. But it was a turtle versus a bunny rabbit. Who's going to win? You're obviously the bunny rabbit, but he kept on getting distracted along the way and stopping. The turtle won because it was consistent. It didn't stop. It kept on powering through. And I've always looked at myself that way a little bit because I'm honestly, if I can be totally transparent here, I'm not the most gifted person on earth. It takes me a little while to learn things. And I have to really grind things out to really figure it out. But here's the thing. I don't give up. I stay consistent with it, showing up every single day. And eventually that pays off for everybody, I believe.
Yeah, I really like that story of the tortoise and the hare too, because he assumed he was super, super, super far ahead.
Right.
And then he took this nap, and I imagine it. He wakes up, and this turtle's inches from the finish line. And by then, if he gave it everything, it wouldn't be enough.
Yeah, it's true. It's totally true, man. You know what's funny? Actually, a lot of athletes have, I shouldn't say this is funny. It's kind of sad. The most gifted athletes naturally, any sport you want to think of, are usually not the best because they don't feel like they have to work as hard. The people that are absolutely the best, again, they're the ones that stick to the fundamentals and they do it every single day consistently. When you talk to people that are the best, think of Jerry Rice, one of the best receivers of all time in NFL history. He doesn't say, I was just naturally the best catcher in the world. No, he did that every single day and stuck to the basics of it. It wasn't fun all the time. I'm sure he hated it. There was people that are far more gifted than he was, but they just got lazy with it. I'm really good at this. I don't necessarily need to do the basics right now because I got it. I can take a few days off because I'm just that good. And some people, they really are naturally just that good at anything, business, school, all that. We all know the students that get straight A's and they don't even try, right? We all know those people and you're how? I'm grinding over here and I can't even get a B, how is this happening? We all know those people, but at the end of the day, if you're the one that's consistently giving 110%, you are going to go further in life than the person who doesn't try, who just for some reason naturally has that ability. At the end of the day, it's the person who is going to be consistent, who is going to win every single time.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And I think your podcast honestly would be a great spot for a lot of my listeners to kind of give them good perspective, kind of give them some of these tools to kind of help them take those steps forward. So I guess what would you want the listeners to do today, and kind of telling us a little bit more about creating a brand?
Yeah, sure, man. First off, I would never sell yourself short. You're doing a fantastic job here. So everyone listening today, stick with Dallin. He's going places. He's been doing this consistently. He's not going to disappear tomorrow. Like he's proven that he's staying with it. So this is a good spot to be. And I'm honestly honored to be a guest on your podcast. I'm really happy to be here. For anyone who's interested in hearing what is more of a masterclass episode, we don't get into a lot of fun conversations like we're having here today. It's more so just high level points and facts, 5 ways to do this, 4 steps for doing that. It's that type of podcast episode. We call it a masterclass. A little bit shorter, a little bit more direct with what we're trying to do. Not as fun, like I said, but I love it. And many of the audience has said that it's really what they need at times. So you can just go to creatingabrand.com. You can find my blog. You can find everything I do there. So it's got the blog, the podcast, any free courses or anything like that I'm offering at that point. And then, of course, a way to contact me. I love hearing from people. And I just find one-on-one interaction helps people more than anything. So I love to hear from people that have heard me talk. If they have any questions about what I said, if they agree with it, if they don't agree with it, I love to have those conversations. But yeah, I appreciate you letting me plug that a little bit. But yeah, creatingabrand.com is where everything's at that I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we've talked a lot about that idea of, I try to talk a little bit more about like yielding today, getting something done today so we can be a better tomorrow. What would be, I guess this is kind of putting you on the spot a little bit.
That's okay.
But like, what would you say would be your call to action question for my listeners today, just to kind of make it fun for them?
Yeah. So your yield. Yes, I envision, love, demonstrated, right? And that's what it stands for. Mm-hmm. And for me, I would just say that the world more than ever needs all of us to show up on our A game. There's not enough people that are actually living the life that they were called to live. If there's one thing I've learned about passion and about people that are living on purpose and that are focused, is that people grab onto them. People are looking for that. But the truth is we've let the world just run us. We're not in control of our time anymore. We all say, oh, I'm just so busy. But if you think about it, did you watch 2 hours of TV today? Did you spend a lot of time on social media? What were you doing that made you so busy? Other than the fact that you're just living. And I believe that this world is so demanding of our time and just all the technology we have around us, really, it just pulls our attention away. But it's the people that know where they're going, are doing it consistently, showing up on purpose, that other people grab onto. And so for me, I just think that we need to be those people for the world. And within that, so this is a huge like action thing, right? I'm adding a lot here. Don't just be that person who's living on purpose, but do it for the sake of other people. There's a quote that I say all the time. I do for one person, I wish I could do for all. So for me, I'm going to help one person and give it my all for them. And I seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. So I want to make sure that I'm all about other people. People need love. People need empathy more than ever in the world today. And I think that if we're those leaders that are showing them, hey, we're living on purpose, we're going here, come with me because I love and care about you. I understand your life isn't always easy, but let's try to make it better together. When you actually can do that, man, you're going to leave a mark on the world that's needed more than ever. And I believe if there was more of that, man, this whole place would look a lot different. But Dallin and listeners today, that's a lot I just gave you. So rewind that a couple times and listen to it. But really, man, that's it for me right now. I'm very passionate about that whole topic.
Yeah, going all in and taking somebody with you for the journey, that's awesome. So
that's it, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Alex. It was quite a pleasure, and we'll definitely have to have you on again in the future.
I'd love that, man. Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And remember, guys, yield today, be a better tomorrow, and definitely check out Alex's stuff too. So that was my interview with Alex, and man, there was so much value in there. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Don't forget to check out his podcast, Creating a Brand. Seriously, would highly recommend it. Really good stuff in there if you like my stuff. And yeah, just like you said, it's kind of like a master class, but there's a ton of value in each episode. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Next episode is number 50. Holy cow. It's amazing that we've made it that far, and I'm going to have a real fun time with it. So definitely follow the podcast so you do not miss it. You can follow it on Instagram as well at Yield Today with Dallin podcast. I post little clips from each episode on there. Feel free to reach out to me too. I'd always love to hear some feedback, what's helped you out with each episode. It helps me be better at this, and I definitely would like to be as good as I possibly can, because it's a journey and we're all learning together, and it's pretty amazing. So thank you all so much for listening, and don't forget to yield today. It'll be a better tomorrow.